This story is about the water woman and her lovers. It's an old Essequibo tale they used to tell in whispers. But even as they whispered the tale, they were afraid the wind might blow their whisperings into the river where the water woman lived. They were afraid the water woman might hear their whisperings and return to haunt them as she had haunted her lover. Here it is from beginning. There was an old coker near Parica, through which water passed to and from the Essequibo River for drainage of the land in the area. On moonlit nights, a naked woman was often seen sitting near the coker, with her back to the road and her face to the river. She was a fair-skinned woman, and she had long black shiny hair rolling over her shoulders and down her back. Below her waist, she was like a fish. When the moon was bright, especially at full moon time, you could see her sitting on the coker, combing her long black shiny hair. You could see very dimly just a part of her face, a side view. But if you stepped nearer to get a closer look, she would disappear. Without even turning her head to see who was coming, she would plunge into the river with a splash and vanish. They called her Water Mama. People used to come from Salem, Tushen, Namrik, and other parts of the east bank of the Essequibo River to see this mysterious creature. They would wait in the bush near the coker from early morning and watch to see her rise from the river. But no matter how closely they watched, they would never see her when she came from the water. For a long time they would wait and watch the coker bathed in moonlight. Then suddenly, as if she had sprung from nowhere, the water woman would appear sitting near the coker, completely naked, facing the river and combing her long black hair. There was a strong belief among the villagers in the area that riches would come to anyone who found Water Mama's comb or a lock of her hair. So they used to stay awake all night at the coker, and then early in the morning, even before the sun rose, they would search around where she had sat combing her hair. But they never found anything. Only the water that had drained off her body remained behind, and also a strong fishy smell. The old people said that after looking at Water Mama or searching near the coker for her hair and her comb, you were always left feeling haunted and afraid. They told stories of people found sleeping as if in a trance while walking away from the coker. They warned that if a man watched her too long and searched for her hair and her comb too often, he would dream about her. And if the man loved her and she loved him, she would haunt him in his dreams. And that would be the end of him, they said, because she was a creature of the devil. These warnings did not frighten the younger and more adventurous men from the villages around. They kept coming from near and far to gaze at Water Mama. After watching her and searching for her hair and her comb, they always had that haunted, fearful feeling. And many mornings, even as they walked away from the coker, they slept as in a trance. But still they returned, night after night, to stare in wonder at that strange, mysterious woman. At last something happened. Something the old people had always said would happen. A man fell in love with the water woman. Some say he was from Salem. Some say he came from Namrik. Others say he hailed from Parica, not far from the coker. Where he came from is not definitely known. But it is certain that he was a young man, tall and dark and big, with broad shoulders. His name was John, and they called him Big John because of his size. When Big John had first heard of Water Mama, he laughed and said she was a jumbie. But as time went by, he heard so many strange things about her that he became curious. And so one moonlit night, he went to the coker to look at the water woman. He had waited for nearly an hour and watched the moonlight shining on the coker and the river. His old doubts had returned and he was about to leave when he saw something strange, something that made my head rise, as the old folks say when they're telling the story. He saw a naked woman sitting near the coker. A moment before he had seen no one there. Then suddenly he saw this strange woman sitting in the moonlight and combing her long black hair. It shone brightly in the moonlight. Big John made a few steps towards her to see her more clearly. Then suddenly she was gone. Without even turning her head around to look at him, she plunged into the river with a big splash and vanished. Where he had seen her sitting, there was a pool of water. And there arose a strong fishy smell. A feeling of dread overcame him. He then set out to get away from there. He tried to run but could only walk. And even as he began walking, his steps were slow and his eyes were heavy with sleep. And that is the way he went home, walking and staggering, barely able to open his eyes now and then to see where he was going, walking and sleeping as in a trance. The next morning, when Big John awoke and remembered what he had seen and experienced the night before, he became afraid. He vowed never to go back to the coca to look at the water woman. But that night the moon rose, flooding the land in silver, glistening in the trees, sparkling on the river. He became enchanted. His thoughts turned to the riverside and the strange woman combing her long black hair. And so later that night he stood near the coca waiting and watching for the strange woman to appear. Just like the night before, she appeared suddenly near the coca, combing her hair in the moonlight. Big John stepped towards her, but she plunged into the river and disappeared. And once again he had that feeling of dread, followed by drowsiness as he walked home. This went on for several nights, with Big John becoming more and more fascinated as he watched the water woman combing her hair in the moonlight. After the third night, he no longer felt afraid, and he walked in the pool of water she had left behind. Sometimes he waited until morning and searched around for locks of her hair and her comb, but he never found them. After a few months of this waiting and watching, Big John felt sad and lost. He had fallen in love with a strange woman, but he could not get near to her, and so he stopped going to the riverside to watch her. When the moon had gone and the dark nights came back, he began to drop her from his mind. But in another month, the moon returned, flooding the land in silver, gleaming in the trees, sparkling on the river. And he remembered the water woman, and he longed to see her combing her hair again. And on the very night when the moon returned, he had a strange dream. He saw the water woman sitting near the coca, combing her long black hair, shining in the moonlight. She sat with her back to the river and her face full towards him. As she combed her hair, she smiled at him, enchanting him with her beauty. He stepped forward to get a closer look, but she did not move. And so at last he saw her clearly. Her bright eyes, her lovely face, her teeth sparkling as she smiled, and her body below her waist tapered off like a fish. She was the most beautiful creature he had ever seen. He stretched out his hands to touch her, and she gave him her comb and said, "Take this to remember me by." Then she jumped into the river and disappeared. When he awoke the next morning, he remembered the dream. He felt happy as he told his friends what he had seen in the dream, but they were afraid for him, and they warned him, she haunting you. She gonna make you dream and dream till you don't know what to do with yourself. When she ready, she gonna do what she like with you. Big John, you better watch yourself with the water woman. The water woman gonna haunt you to the end. These warnings made Big John laugh, and he told them, "She can't do me anything in a dream." But they warned him again, "You forget about the water woman, but she don't forget about you. Is you started when you watch she so much at the coca? Now you rouse she and she want you. That is the story now, she want you." Big John laughed off these warnings and told them that nothing was going to happen to him, as nothing could come from a dream. But later that day he saw something strange. It made him shiver with dread. On the floor near his bed was a comb. He could not believe his eyes. It looked very much like the comb the water woman had given to him in the dream. He wondered how a comb he had seen in a dream could get into his room. When he told his friends about finding the comb, they said, "It's best for you to go away from here. Is you started when you watched so much at the coca?" That night he had another dream. In this dream he saw the water woman sitting in the moonlight. He stepped even closer to her than before, and she smiled at him. For the first time since he had seen her, she was not combing her hair, and she had no comb in her hand. She pulled out a few strands of her hair and gave them to him and said, "Keep these to remember me by." And he took them in his hands and smiled at her. In another instant, she was gone with a splash into the river. The next morning, Big John awoke with a smile as he remembered the dream. But as he sat up in the bed, he found himself with a few strands of hair in his hands. His eyes opened wide in surprise. It was only then that he realized that he was getting caught up in something strange. And so the dreams went on night after night. They became like magnets, drawing Big John to bed early every night and holding him fast in sleep till morning. They no longer made him feel afraid on awakening. In one dream, the water woman gave him a conch shell. On awakening the next morning, he found sand on his bed and the grains of sand in both hands. One night he dreamt that he and the water woman played along the river bank, splashing each other with water. The next morning he found his bed wet and water splashed all over the room. Big John told his friends about these dreams, and they warned him that the water woman had him under a spell. They were right. He kept on dreaming about her night after night. Then came his last dream. The water woman stood by the riverside holding a large bundle to her bosom. She smiled and said, "You have my comb and the strands of my hair. I have given you other little gifts to remember me by. Tonight, I shall give you money to make you rich. If you keep it a secret, you will stay on earth and enjoy it. If you do not keep it a secret, you must come with me and be my lover forever." She hurled the bundle to him and then jumped into the river and was gone. When Big John awoke the next morning, he found the floor of the room covered with tens of thousands of $5 bills piled up high in heaps. It took him a long time to gather them and count them. It was a vast fortune. Big John was too excited to keep the news about the dream and the fortune it had brought him. He went around the village and told some of his closest friends about it. When they went with him to his house and saw those great piles of money, their eyes bulged and their mouths opened wide in amazement. Then they made a wild scramble for it. They fought among themselves all that afternoon for the money. Some of them got away with little fortunes. Some ran away with their pockets bulging with notes. Others were left with notes that got torn up in the scrambling and the fighting. Big John himself was beaten by the others and got nothing. They ran away and left him. What happened to Big John after that, no one knows. Some say he dreamed again of the water woman that night, and she took him away in the dream. Some say he went to the coca several nights to look for her, but never found her, and so he drowned himself in the river. Others say that the water woman sent her water people for him, and they took him to live with her in her home at the bottom of the river. But if you go down to the coca near Parika on any night of the full moon, you will see the water woman sitting with her back to the road and her face to the river, combing her long, black, shiny hair in the moonlight. You will also see a tall, big man with broad shoulders standing close beside her. The end. That was another one of the ghost stories. I really love reading and listening to ghost stories. Now, there are several other stories that I could share with you about children, even of my past. Many children used to believe, I've never seen it, but at my old school, children would say to the teachers, "Oh, miss, we saw the river," they used to say, "the river maid down at the back of the school, and she jumped in the hole." And the teacher would say, "Oh, it's nonsense." And lots of children would say they would see her. I think some, it was just their imagination. I think with many, they were afraid and just said echoed what they heard other children saying. I myself had never seen the mermaid. I hear people speaking of it. It's like those stories that people tell. I've never known of anybody to have seen one. They always say they're half fish, half human, and they're always having their combing their hair. Never seen one, never seen the comb. I've not encountered anything to do with mermaids. I know that I've encountered other things to do with spirits. I've seen a spirit once in, oh yes, now that I remember, I've seen a spirit once in my life, really full-faced. And it was then I understood something about the spirit world. You know, at the time I was living with my mom and dad, I was in Jamaica. And you know, I went to sleep, and so there I was sleeping. So I put I put my head down at the foot of the bed and I was sleeping. So I woke up. I don't know, I woke up at that time and I saw a lady. She had the form and shape of my mom, and she was walking, but she had her head held down. And this is a true duppy story now, serious business. I'm involved in this one, definitely. And she had her head held down, and she was walking, so I thought it was my mom. But when I looked, she was a little bit more full-hipped than my mom, and I noticed that when she walked, she was swaying, and she had her head held down. I said to myself, well, that's not my mom. So I raised myself up on the bed a little bit more to have a look at her. Whilst I was raising myself up off the bed to have a look at her, she didn't see me, or she didn't see what was happening. And I myself was there peering at her. And she was walking in the passage coming down. And then she started walking, coming towards me whilst I'm on the bed. And I'm a little bit raised up looking at this woman. She raised her head. And she looked at me. And when she saw that I was looking at her, she was so afraid. And that's when I understood that spirits are sometimes, they don't want to be seen. I think when you in the physical world see them in their spirit form, they don't like it. And she was so afraid, and her eyes were shut out big, and she was looking at me like this, and she started walking backwards. She was afraid of me. Whilst I got so afraid, and I was looking at her, and I just said, as a Christian woman, there was a, I would call it, there was this holy boldness, I call it. I said, in the name of Jesus, get out of my room now. And the woman just started walking backwards. And her eyes were as big as mine. I can tell you, see how I opened them as wide as this right about now. Her eyes were as big and shiny as mine were. She had on a head tie. And she's just walking towards the back of the door, looking so afraid of me. And she disappeared right in front of me on the rug by the back door. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Man, I could feel my heart beating in my big toe. And that was no joke. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. My heart was just beating so hard. I had to pray. I said, God, please, just calm me. Come when I saw this woman she was disintegrated like into thin air in front of me right there. And that was the first time I had seen a ghost in my life. I was so afraid. But then I prayed, and then I just calmed and I went back to sleep. When I woke up in the morning, I was telling my mother and my father that I saw a spirit in the night. And my mom said, oh, maybe it's one of your ancestors, she said to me. She said it was one of your ancestors. I said, oh, maybe so. But then I remember now, that was not my first encounter. When I was a younger child, I remember, I think I was about 11. Yes, I think I was getting ready to start secondary school. Yes, I remember. Was I that old? Yes, I think I was about 10, 11. And I was in the room and we'd gone to sleep. And I remember, and I woke up. And when I woke up, I saw 3 people. You know, they were sitting on the floor in the middle of the room with their legs pulled up under them. Like how those Indians, I used to watch TV with the Indian chief, would pull up their legs. I saw 3 of them. And they were sitting on the floor. So I was a bit, I was wondering, am I in a dream? So I pulled the covers back over my head. I was a bit afraid now. And I pulled the covers over my head. And I said, they say, I used to read in a book, I think it was a Nancy Drew book or one of them books, that if you want to know if you're really in a dream, just pinch yourself a couple times. I started to pinch myself a few times. So I pinched myself. I was feeling it. So I said, no, I'm not dreaming. So I pulled my head again from under the cover now. And I looked, and the 3 of them were still there in a circle, like how the Indians would sit. And sitting down there, I'll never forget. And I just pulled my head right back and I went under the covers, and I never came back from under the covers. And I remember that was my first experience of seeing in the realm of the spirit and seeing in the realm of the supernatural when I was about 10 or 11. And I just covered my head, and I think after that I went back to sleep. And in the morning I was telling my father, I said, Daddy, I saw 3 people, sitting in a circle right in the middle here. I said I was so afraid. I was telling him I was pinching myself. And then I went back to sleep because I was so afraid I was pulling it over my head. So that is my story, and that is true. I have seen in the realm. I have seen spirits. I have seen ghosts. There are times I think there are some spirits who are some kind of a guide. So they're called spirit guides, and I think everybody has an angel. Everybody has an angel, and that's really great. And people have people going before them, guiding them, and you also have what I call there are those demonic agents who also are following people, and sometimes there are some people who can see them in the realm of the spirit also. I've never seen any in the demonic, but I know that I've seen other spirits. I wasn't frightened by it, but I'm just looking forward to hearing other people share about their experiences.